With the much anticipated night practice in the books and the preseason around the corner, we have some kind of glaring questions to ask about the Vikings offense. Is it okay? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. It is Town Hall Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions as submitted to me via the Google form in the show notes. If you have a question, go click on that, fill out the question, or if you just have a hot take you would like to confess anonymously, you may do so, and I will react on the show and protect your anonymity. So let that thing fly. Before we get into the questions, though, a couple of things that we should talk about. The Vikings signed a new tight end. The night practice happened, and there's some takeaways to talk about from that. And so we kind of have to go through a little bit of news, and then I'll get to as many questions as I can, as well as some of your hot takes. Let's start with the night practice. And really, I mean, it was more of the same that we've seen from camp. If you are the kind of person that's like gone to camp a whole bunch of different days, you're not going to see a whole lot of stuff that really challenged any of your perceptions. JJ McCarthy was sharp in the 7-on-7s and in unpressured reps, but there were a lot of reps where the backups on the O-line, especially Michael Juergens, just in school, really struggled. And so the offense really couldn't move the ball at all. There were a ton of sacks. They had like one play where they could actually move the ball, block up what they were trying to do, and get the timing to happen, which raises a couple of questions. The first one is JJ McCarthy doing well? And it sounds to me, based on the reporting, based on the clips that I can see, that it really isn't JJ McCarthy's fault that the offense is doing poorly when it does do poorly, that it has to do with protection stuff. And if anything, he's finding ways out of those situations and making plays where there isn't a play, which he was pretty good at Michigan, and he was even pretty good at in camp last year. So that's not super surprising or anything like that, but it definitely doesn't raise as much of a concern about JJ McCarthy as it might like imply, right? Offense doing bad, quarterback must be doing bad, but let's avoid jumping to those conclusions, right? Another way to think about this is that he, from like a jugs machine analysis perspective, has looked pretty sharp and has thrown some really fun passes. There's a ton of really fun clips out there. And the plays that do go poorly are a lineman got beat. And then you have to ask, okay, which linemen are getting beat? It's like I said, it's Juergens and it's School a lot. It's Donovan Jackson a little more than I'd like. But as a rookie going up against Jonathan Allen all the time, I'm willing to give that a little bit of grace. It's more that the Vikings have a couple of issues in their depth. And that raises the second question that I think is worth asking, which is, do the Vikings have a situation with their O-line depth? In particular, those two guys, Juergens and Justin School. By the way, Ryan Kelly, veteran, rest day. Kevin O'Connell said he had like an elbow something, called it a bump and a bruise, described TJ Hawkinson's injury the same way, and didn't appear very concerned about it, but basically gave a whole bunch of veterans the night practice off. So there was no Hawkinson, there was no Justin Jefferson, of course, no Christian Darrisaw, no Ryan Kelly. I'm not going to raise too many alarms about an offense missing that much. I mean, that's maybe 3 of the top 5 most important players on the entire team are missing. Yeah, that's going to have an impact on things. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at an extreme result like that and say, hey, what is up with that? Michael Juergens, I don't really get it. I'm going to be honest. I liked the college tape that I saw when we first drafted him, and I had high hopes. And then he was just terrible in the preseason last year. Just dreadful, god awful. I mean, he was a huge liability in the preseason last year, and he's showing up to camp and appearing to be a huge liability again on both the first and second teams when he is playing there. I don't really get why the team, as it has been reported by Ben Gessling and others, is super high on him as a possible starter down the road, let alone just the backup center. I don't see this guy as rosterable right now. That is coming from just a few clips that I've seen. and analysis from his first rookie preseason. So I'm maybe being a little bit too harsh, but I am definitely going to have my eye on this in the preseason. And Justin School also getting absolutely blasted all of the time. I know that's Jonathan Grenard on the other side of him, but sometimes it's Gabe Murphy or Dallas Turner. All of those guys are getting the better of Justin School. Are we sure this is the guy we want in there if Christian Darrisaw is indeed not ready to go week 1 or he goes down with another injury later on in the season? Are we sure we want that? Or should we start considering some of these younger guys, Leroy Watson, who's been getting more run with the twos, Logan Brown, Walter Rouse? Maybe one of these young guys should challenge Justin School for that job a little bit more than he has. He hasn't been rotating with any of those guys. Maybe it's time to rethink that decision. And then finally, related to the news about TJ Hawkinson, who has a hip injury, is what he apparently came up lame a little bit with and pulled himself out of one of the recent practices, didn't participate in the night practice. Nick Vanette is now on the team. They release Marcellus Johnson, one of the tackles that was like on the 3rd, 4th team. So Nick Vanette now joins, and I don't know if this is about Hawkinson so much. It doesn't sound like he is in any risk of like missing extended time. He was never going to play in the preseason anyways, so he might be in that same Justin Jefferson category about like, we know that you're fine, whatever, put you on ice until we actually need you for week 1. But it's more that I don't know what the Vikings want to do at tight end 3. You got Hawkinson, you got Oliver. Kevin O'Connell has expressed a ton of excitement about that, as he should. And then you had this sort of battle. It was supposed to be Gavin Bartholomew. He has a lower back injury and he is out for, we don't really have a timeline. So that could be PUP, that could be IR, that could be any number of really bad things. So put him to the side for now. He doesn't really exist. And then you had like Ben Urasek and Bryson Nesbitt and Giovanni Ricci, who has been like cut twice in the last 2 years. That's not a group that I think was inspiring a lot of confidence. So I think this move is a little bit more about that. And I think Nick Vanette has a real chance to make the team as a 3rd tight end. As you know, he's been in the league for 10 years. He is very much at the tail end of his career. So him making the team is not nearly the lock it maybe would have been 2 or 3 years ago. But, another situation to watch, and that'll be really interesting in the preseason. I've got time for a question or two right now, so let's dive into the Town Hall Tuesday questions. And the first one comes from Frustrated Podcast Listener, who I think asks a good one, which is, why does the national media never want to talk about the Vikings seriously compared to other teams? I just listened to Football 301 with Nate Tyson, Charles McDonald, previewing the NFC North, and they spent 45 minutes on the Bears, 20 to 25 on the Lions and Packers, and then they just spent 5 to 10 minutes previewing the Vikings to say, well, everything depends on JJ McCarthy, with no other analysis on any other players or positions. Okay, so I have not listened to this episode. I don't often catch that show, so I can't really speak to like what their take is or what they said, and it stands for itself. Like you don't need my opinion on them, but what I will say about this general trend is, I don't think it's as ubiquitous as you think. I've listened to Vikings previews from Sahid the Call that I think are a lot more comprehensive. Brett Coleman has an hour-long show that is way more comprehensive and I think goes over a lot of the, kind of hits a lot of the main beats of Vikings analysis that talks about, okay, here's their free agency class. They're expecting a lot out of it. They're expecting a lot out of it because of the draft classes that haven't gone well. And here's that whole situation, the JJ McCarthy and moving on from Sam Darnold thing, and kind of going over, it is very much the, surface level kind of first tier explanation. But it goes over a lot of that stuff in depth with even some schematic analysis and like deep cap stuff and stuff. So if you want national perspectives on the Vikings with a little more detail, that certainly does exist. But what I'm going to say in defense of Nate and Charles is that is kind of the update on the Vikings. If you watched the Vikings last year and you saw them win 14 games and you go, hey, what's up with this Vikings team? And you were kind of, your eyes were closed all offseason. They'd say, well, they got rid of Darnold. They have JJ McCarthy, who was in the building. They're ready to roll with him. And everything else is like more or less the same. They're expecting some step ups from other guys, but it's the same 2 linebackers. It's a lot of this. It's the same edge rushers. It's a lot of the same secondary. There's a couple new guys on the interior of the offensive line and defensive line, but they're kind of made some tweaks. And otherwise it's that they turn the keys over to JJ McCarthy is the headline of the Vikings. So I don't super blame them for being really simplistic there. And I don't know if I necessarily agree that national media never wants to talk about the Vikings seriously. I think a lot of national media really fumbled on the Vikings with the Aaron Rodgers, I'll call it a saga, that was pretty transparently manufactured to generate value for the people providing the information. And I was really, really frustrated with that. But when it comes to like season previews, it is kind of, it's the same team as last year, but with JJ. Like that's kind of that's a fair take, I think. And a pretty optimistic one. Okay, I'll answer the rest of the questions that I'll be able to get to and get to your hot takes next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's time. It's getting there. Okay, get your drafts done. And this year, you can play Yahoo Fantasy. And this year, all of the fantasy football that I'm involved in is going to be on Yahoo Fantasy. And it should be for you too, whether you're a first-timer or veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days through August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. And they're going to keep dropping cool stuff like this for like a whole week here. So stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. Moving right along here on Town Hall Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Let's start rapid firing a whole bunch of questions. The next one comes from Cam X Storm. I think it's been a minute since I got a question from you, Cam, or since I read a question from you, Cam. So welcome back. Yes, a lot has been made of the extra weight that Turner put on in the offseason. Do you envision Turner taking on some of the Jihad Ward role where they would line him up inside on pass rush downs, or is he still too small? So if he were too small, that actually would be a good way it's a good way to use an undersized edge. I do see him taking on a lot of that role. It looks like he's taking on, I think, a more variable role than that, but some of those reps are part of it. Yes, I've seen him line up on the inside quite a bit in camp, and in sets where you have Grenard and Van Ginkel on the edges and then Daniel Hunter on the inside. I don't know what down and distances they're practicing on those, or if they're even practicing with downs and distances. But I think that there's a lot more going on to it than that. But yeah, that's a facet of it. Yort, but the H is silent as the Bears will be in January. Asks, why is there no Jordan Mason hype? I've been super excited to watch him play, but haven't seen much hype in media or on social media. It's tough in camp to hype up a running back because every play looks like a 40-yard touchdown in camp because they can't tackle. So, and these running backs just keep running through it. So everything looks like it. So it's just really hard to see. Like Aaron Jones isn't really getting any hype either. It kind of is like people say, oh, he looks kind of fast. And then if that's it, that's it. But it's hard to have like a really big, cool camp highlight as a running back, just because the nature of it is like your big, cool highlights also look the same as like ho-hum plays where you would have been tackled after 2 yards because you run into the end zone every time anyways. So that's more of a facet of camp. I would probably just sit on your hands on that one and wait for the actual games to play. If you're excited about Jordan Mason, I think you're perfectly justified to be, and we'll see what kind of role he has on Monday night on August 9th. I'm sorry, on September 8th. I got my dates European. Tommy asks, everything about JJ's personality, demeanor, aura, whatever word you want to use, reminds me of Joe Burrow, who also had a knee injury as a rookie. That means we're going to the Super Bowl, right? Yep. Chris asks, do you expect a revamped run game with the new O-line and continuity at QB and running back, or do you expect it to continue with zone and duo? I don't expect a ton of difference, and it doesn't look like that's what's been happening in camp. A lot of zone with like motion trying to influence linebackers, and then run zone kind of counter to that, or to take advantage of the spacing created by that. If you can like widen somebody out by adding another player onto like that side of the field, widen out the nickel, and then, run to make that nickel make a harder play, that kind of thing. It sounds like they're going to do a lot of the same of that. And I will also reiterate that like the run game to Kevin O'Connell seems to just be a play action setup thing. And I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of frequent run plays that aren't meant to set up the play action fake that looks like that play, which means you're just not going to get a lot of variety. And it's something that I think is critiquable about Kevin O'Connell's approach to the game. I think that should be something he takes a little more seriously, but I don't think we're going to see it. Nolan M asks, it was interesting to hear Matt Daniels talk about these roster bubble receivers, and it made me think that if we keep 6, the wide receiver 6 spot might come down to who contributes most on special teams. Assuming Felton and Moore are locks, who do you have winning the last spot, and do you agree that the special teams will be the difference? Okay, so we just went over this on the squad show, the Vikings squad show. We did some 53-man roster stuff, but I do think that our assumptions are being challenged here in that Lucky Jackson is like playing for wide receiver 4 right now. Like, he's ascended the depth chart quite significantly. I think Lucky Jackson has has made a really strong case to make this roster. In terms of the special teams question, I would say, who's your punt gunner? That's a big one. And Ty Felton is almost certainly going to be one of those. That's kind of part of the reason he got drafted as high as he did. And on the other side, Tim Jones is the most experienced one. So that could be your wide receiver 6 that makes the team on special teams. He has a long history of doing that. He did that on the Jaguars for years, where he basically never played from scrimmage as a receiver, but always made it as a punt gunner. But you also have Lucky Jackson is also competing for that spot. Rondale Moore as a returner could very much be a thing, although I don't think Rondale Moore's spot on the wide receiver depth chart is necessarily locked down. And I think Lucky Jackson is making that complicated. That's an interesting battle in and of itself. But I would probably say Tim Jones, Felton, Moore, and Lucky Jackson are your sort of second 4 guys after the Jefferson, Addison, Naylor trio that's actually going to play. And then those 4 guys are kind of the next guys, and you're going to end up cutting somebody there. Scold Outside asks, what's the story with Theo Jackson? Is he playing a Cam Bynum role, a Harrison Smith understudy, or are they going to opt for more 3 cornerback sets and play Smith and Metellus as starters? Great question. I don't think you're going to see a lot of 3 cornerback sets. It sounds like the most frequent defensive package has been Harrison Smith, Josh Metellus, and Theo Jackson with 2 cornerbacks. That sounds like that's the nickel package that they've been using, the same big nickel thing. However, with the 2s, Theo Jackson has been playing. Josh Metellus is not playing with the 2s, which tells you, okay, Theo Jackson is still very much below those principal 2 guys on the depth chart. And I would anticipate that in sets with 2 safeties, you're going to have Harrison Smith and Josh Metellus out there, and Theo Jackson will come off the field. In terms of whether they'll play nickel or big nickel, they will absolutely play a mix of both. 3 corners, 3 safeties, 2 corners, 2 safeties. There will be a mix of both. I don't think that they're going to have like a simple base out of either one. However, I think they will probably favor the safeties because to me, it seems like the organization trusts Theo Jackson a lot. And Jeff Okudah is new to here, and you're basically choosing which one of those guys do you want to be on the field, which is going to be situationally decided. Iowa Fan asks, what is the weird obsession with Max Brosmer becoming QB2 from Gophers fans in the beat? He's never taken anything more than 3rd team reps. That's not true. He has taken some 2nd team reps, I believe. He has taken far fewer than Sam Howell and Brett Rippon, which is trending toward Rippon and away from Howell, so that job is like open. But it's very much just Gopher bias. It's just Minnesotans wanting the Minnesotan to do the thing. It's the same reason people freak out about like Tyler Johnson not being a Viking, which made me invent the BB bar, which is that if your favorite receiver that you're mad the Vikings didn't get got less than 20 catches for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season, you're not allowed to be mad that we didn't get him. That's the Tyler Johnson rule, the BB bar. He did not cross the BB bar that year. But no, I don't know. Why is Minnesota media obsessed with the Minnesota guy? How hard do you have to think about that? Samuel O'Shaughnessy. Okay, we got a bunch of questions here from NFC North fans who maybe came in and answered and asked them after the NFC North review I did last week. But Samuel O'Shaughnessy is the first one who asks, why do Vikings fans act so much more superior to the Bears when the Bears are historically better? And even in more modern time, neither team has really had any playoff success, so it's weird that the Vikings fans love to act that their team is so much better than the Bears. The answer is because the Vikings are better than the Bears. They were significantly better than the Bears last year. They swept them, and I don't think enough has changed about the Bears that the Vikings don't have their equivalent to. So the Vikings are very much favored to be better than the Bears right now. They are in a spot that the nation very much sees as better than the Bears roster-wise. I don't know what to tell you, man. Nathan asks, why are media members like Kyle Brandt and Chase Daniel trying to act like there's an anti-Caleb Williams agenda among the rest of the media and fans when Caleb Williams has been maybe the most hyped up football player in college or NFL since 2022? They're talking about me. I'm the anti-Caleb Williams agenda. Like, I'm strongly... What do you mean they're acting like there's an anti-Caleb Williams agenda? You're looking at him. No, so... I will agendize against NFC North QBs, okay? Jordan Love, I'm coming for you, all right? But that's my job. I'm a Vikings guy, all right? That's my solemn duty, and I take it seriously. But no, the Bears media cycle has gone through some weird moments this camp, and it's because a few clips have gone viral of Caleb Williams looking really poor, and I think guys like especially Chase Daniel, who is pretty loyal to Chicago, feels the need to like run interference, be like, hey, this isn't as bad as it looks, here's the context, here's whatever, and to maybe like also try to get the same attention on the plays where he does well, and then it just seems like this guy's like super pro Bears biased, which he just might be. I don't know where Kyle Brandt lands on that. But I think he just maybe likes Caleb Williams. He's allowed to do that. That's fine. But yeah, I think for me, what I have noticed, and I'm very much coming from just as biased an angle, so, keep that in mind. Caleb Williams has to do a lot less to get a lot more praise than Drake May does, or than Jaden Daniels even had to do, because everyone expected him to be so good that the second they see it, their confirmation bias kicks in. And it's really easy to wash away all the bad stuff, especially for a young QB, right? If you have a young QB and he has terrible stats, just compare them to young Josh Allen, right? That's all you got to do. But what is coming out of camp in Bears camp, and I talked about it last week, has been really polarized with Caleb Williams. There's been some really nasty looking moments, some really rough stuff, and then there's been some good moments as well. And depending on your media diet, you might be kind of exclusively exposed to one or the other, and then you're going to get the wrong idea. I have a couple more questions about not the Vikings, but I also have some hot takes, so I want to make sure we can get to those. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever wished managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're just trying to save up a little bit more, whether you're just trying to get a more healthy financial lifestyle, or you're planning a big purchase or a big investment of some kind, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. It combines a lot of the apps you might already have on your phone into one easy and convenient location that tracks all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can then go to a different part of the app and work on building your wealth. If you share finances with someone, Monarch Money helps you stay on the same page with a joint account and make sure that there's full transparency, no confusion, and that can help relieve some of the tension if there is any. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. Moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast, the next Town Hall Tuesday question. Just a couple more questions, then we'll get to the hot takes. Comes from Curious Packers fan, who asks, I listen to your show to stay up to date on the Vikings from a rival standpoint. Would love to hear your perspective on the state of the state for all rivalries the Vikings have across the NFC North. Feels like the Packers have always been the Vikings' biggest rival, but hearing you talk about your history doc, it sounds like the Bears were the bigger rival at the start of the Vikings organization. Yes. Okay, yeah. So the brief story is, when the Vikings started, the Bears, George Halas personally had a pretty big role in the construction, the actual inception of the Vikings. The Vikings wouldn't exist were it not for George Halas's intervention. Or if they did, they would have been in an AFL team and it would have been a totally different thing. They're an NFL team and an NFC team because of George Halas. They end up in the same division as George Halas's Bears. Their first game is against George Halas's Bears. There's immediately bad blood there. And there continues Because of the way that game went down. The Vikings win that game. It's a big upset. George Halas was furious. There was some drama leading up to it, some talking, some gossiping, people talking, shooting shots at each other through the media. And it got pretty bitter. And then for like 30 years, it was the Bears were the chief rival of the Vikings. The Packers would play the Vikings all the time, but they were sort of ships passing in the night. When the Vikings started in the 60s and the Packers were their, Vince Lombardi's 60s version, they would beat up on the Vikings all the time, but everyone would beat up on the Vikings all the time. So it wasn't like a big thing. And then in the 70s, the Packers went through this like dark era of Packers history where they went through a bunch of different quarterbacks and a bunch of different coaches after Lombardi retired. And they never really got it back into division relevance until Favre got there. So for the whole kind of Viking Super Bowl era, the Packers weren't really their serious competition. It was still kind of the Bears. And in the 90s, when Brett Favre and the Packers became the chief rival to the Vikings, well, Barry Sanders was in the division too, and the Bears were still no slouch, and like everybody was good. But it was the Brett Favre into Rodgers era that really made the Packers the threat that they are, and therefore the rival that they are. So everybody alive who's like my age and younger, I was born in 92, the year Favre became a Packer. So everybody my age and younger has only ever known Favre or Rodgers or Jordan Love Packers teams. But I think if you're like 20 years older, then you remember a time when the Packers weren't a team you would think about a lot. They were like 5-9, whatever, and we've got a bigger rivalry game coming up. So the Bears were the chief rival during that time, but after the 90s, the Bears fell off and became, this weird team. They had their Jay Cutler era, I guess, but it was a lot more, weird kind of forgettable eras, and they've gone through this like decade or two of futility. Meanwhile, the Packers have become the main threat. Therefore, the Packers are the chief rival nowadays. Last question comes from Minnesota Sports Appreciator, who says, would there ever be a time where an NFL team like the Vikings would fire sale like the Twins just did? I understand the NFL trade deadline is usually overhyped, but what just happened to the Twins is diabolical. So I haven't followed this story at all, but I understand that the Twins at the trade deadline traded like every valuable asset they have entirely away, and now they're like a shell of a team, and they're going into like a full rebuild. We have seen some versions of this, but the NFL trade deadline is like waters it down a little bit for a couple of reasons. One, it's earlier in the season, so you don't have as much of a sense for if you're going to be a contender or not than in the baseball or basketball trade deadlines that happen a little later. So teams have an easier time kind of shutting it down. And two, the in-season trades, like the onboarding process is a lot more annoying, and in-season trades are a lot more annoying. It's just a costlier thing to do. So you're not going to have quite as many buyers for all of your selling. And it might even be a little bit more profitable to wait till the end of the season if you're going to get rid of those players anyways. But we've definitely seen players tear it all down, trade everybody away, and then tear it down to the studs. Patriots just did that. The Bears did that when Ryan Poles got there. It just doesn't often happen at the deadline. All right. Let's read some hot takes, right? If you ever have a hot take, put it in the show notes, or put it in the description, the Google form in the description of the show notes. You can click hot take. Give me an anonymous name. I will protect your anonymity. The first one comes from Dank Epic Trollolster 42069 Hoo-ya. All right. Says, season-long prediction, a running back gets injured and the Vikings trade for Cam Akers again. I think your name was a hotter take than this take is. This is like everybody's first Vikings joke that they're going to tell about the Vikings this year. Yeah, sure, man. It'll happen every year. Sure. Some Call Me Tim says, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Dallas Turner will combine for a total of 40 plus sacks and turnovers this season. So that's like 13 to 15 a pop, I think, if I did my math right, 12 to 15 a pop. Which is, a crazy amount of sacks for all of those guys, and turnovers is not going to help that much. This is an extraordinarily optimistic prediction, but that's what we get for the hot takes. I mean, look, this trio has been hyped up by the Vikings themselves, and I'm not talking about the media team. I'm talking about the coaches on the podium have been like, here are our 3 starters. We're excited about it. Get excited about it. You have permission. So yeah, they should be good if the coaches have been forthright with us. If not, then I think we have some pretty sharp follow-up questions for them. Optimistic in Owatonna says, the Vikings' floor is 9-8 if the roster stays relatively healthy. Even if JJ bottoms out, the coaching and the rest of the roster is good enough to lean on the defense and run game. So they'll pretty consistently lose to the good teams and beat the bad teams. Splitting the division, 9 wins could look like beating the Falcons, Steelers, Browns, Seahawks, Cowboys, and Giants. Yeah. So if you go through the schedule, you're going to find, oh, well, that one's a win. Well, that one's a win. Well, that one's a loss. Well, that one's a loss. Because by design, you play a bunch of last place teams, a bunch of first place teams, a bunch of second place teams, a bunch of third place teams. Then you go, well, split the division. And it's really like every team can do this because the schedule is specifically built to enable it. So I don't find that particularly compelling, but saying the floor is 9-8 if the roster stays, look, a bad quarterback can ruin a lot of good teams. So if JJ is really just putridly terrible, Christian Ponder bad, he can absolutely ruin this team more than 9-8. That is not going to be the floor. But on the flip side, I do think that, he will be elevated by this talent. There's too much talent around him for him not to be elevated by that talent. I was actually talking to Peter Bukowski about this. He was asking me, what is with these like statistical predictions for JJ McCarthy when you don't know anything about him? And I said, look, he could be the 16th best QB in the league and put up top 8 stats. And then we have this argument about whether he's really the 16th or 8th best QB. And like, that could be the season that we have here. But that doesn't necessarily translate to wins. Luke Inertia says, Parsons, yummy, yum, gimme. It's not a sentence, my friend. That's not really a thought even. You want to trade for Micah Parsons, I assume? I get everybody wants to salivate over like a versatile, one of the best versatile weapons in the league getting, into Brian Flores' mad scientist lab. But they've got plenty at this position. And that giving up more assets, there's going to be a huge diminishing return on that. Plus, I think there's going to be other teams that are probably willing to give a lot more and pay a lot more for him to be like a real part of their things moving forward. But you know what? Greet it out, dude. This is the hot take section. Vikings guy has a follow-up on one from, I think, last week, who said, I really did meet Isaiah Rodgers last week and would gladly send you a picture. Also, I think Theo Jackson will become a top 15 safety this year. Now, that is a hot take. I don't need the picture. I definitely believe you. He said that he met Isaiah Rodgers at camp, which is like a thing that you can if you like get the VIP or whatever, you can, go meet the players. So that totally makes sense to me. Great Theo Jackson hot take. Scold Outside says, with some of the hype around LDR and Redmond, I think our defensive line rotation and production will challenge the concept of starters in Hargrave and Allen, meaning the snap share will be more balanced than we expected. I can actually see that with Hargrave. I like this one. Allen, not so much. Jonathan Allen appears to still be Jonathan Allen in camp. He's been pretty difficult to block, and he has been the culprit on a lot of these, oh my God, the O-line can't block anybody plays. Someone's winning those reps, right? And that guy has been Jonathan Allen a lot. Hargrave, I could see. Hargrave, I think, is a rotational player, and the other guys will be rotational players, so they'll be kind of, all part of this sort of amorphous blob of D-line talent. Luke Braun, ? Says Harrison Phillips / Hargrave gets traded before the start of the season to make the way for the D-line youth movement. This one would have hit super hard like 2 weeks ago, but I think that room is shaping up to be pretty predictable now as Taki Taimani is falling away. Levi Drake Rodriguez is having a really nice camp, and he is sort of making that's a 1-for-1 move. So I don't think the roster pressure on the defensive line is as I don't think there's a problem you need to solve anymore. I think that problem is kind of working itself out just by the nature of competition in camp. And the last one comes from Kyle Orton, who I'm going to assume is another angry Bears fan because he says Ryan Poles' rebuild approach will be proven correct as Caleb Williams wins MVP and lands the Bears on a Super Bowl run, while Kwesi's Vikings will be the worst team in the NFL with a handoff merchant getting exposed at QB and the second oldest defense in the NFL getting gashed every week. Somebody looked up a couple of fun facts about the Vikings before they did this. Congratulations. You said the first thing everybody talked about 2 years ago. With JJ McCarthy, that was like a pretty quickly debunked thing by anyone who was even semi-serious about the draft. But good job. You looked up a scouting report from like Walter Football and some average age statistics on StatHead. I'm proud of you. All right. It's a very unserious. I mean, it's a hot take. So that's the hottest take. That's why it's last. Congratulations. I will talk to you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.